Today I want to share a story by Thomas Golden. It's called Swallowed by a Snake, and I think it's a very elegant analogy about managing grief. Long, long ago, in a place far south of here, there was a village at the edge of the jungle. This village was a peaceable place, except for one major problem, the boa constrictor. These boas were not the snakes we know today. They were huge snakes, many times as large as the boas of our modern world. They were uncontrolled animals whose viciousness was only exceeded by their appetite. Much of the time they ate other animals, but without doubt the boa's favourite meal was humans. Snakes would enter the village at will and eat whatever and whomever they pleased. There was no place to hide from these monstrous beasts. One day in the village, a woman was speaking openly about her pain related to the boa. She spoke of her two children who had been devoured by this beast and was lamenting the state of affairs of having to live in such an unsafe place. She wondered aloud if there might not be someone who could put this snake's reign of terror to an end. Her hope was that the men, women and children of this village could live in peace. Now at this time a man had been listening to her pain and suffering. He was the man who played the flute most beautifully. He pondered her words, and he knew that something must be done. So he prepared. He packed his bundle of maize and his small knife, and off he went into the jungle, playing his flute as he walked. The man carefully chose his spot in the jungle and sat and played his flute. He was aware that the boa was approaching, but continued playing. Then, without warning, the snake attacked and swallowed the flute player with one bite. The darkness from within the snake's belly was complete. The flute player tried to make himself as comfortable as possible, then unpacked his belongings and took out his knife. He consciously and deliberately used the knife to cut away the snake's belly a bit at a time. Now the snake reacted to this tremendous pain in its belly by making as much room for the flute player as it possibly could. The flute player knew that it was going to take a while to complete the task of killing this huge snake. He proceeded to cut and eat a bit of the snake's flesh each time he got hungry. This obviously went on for quite some time, and the snake was continually in pain. In fact, he made it a point to tell all of his snake friends to never again eat a human being, or they would suffer the consequences of this great pain that he now felt. After a while, the flute player came to the boa's heart, and upon cutting this, the boa died. At this point, the flute player emerged from the snake and returned to the village playing his flute. Well, everyone in the village was surprised to see him and asked where he'd been. The flute player responded that he'd been in the boa, and to prove it, he showed them a piece of the snake's heart. The people then knew that the snake was indeed dead. This is a great story. The key points for me in this story are: it tells us that going into grief may at times feel like being eaten by a snake. With grief, we can suddenly feel cut off from our everyday life and feel our existence is confined and we're surrounded by our grief, just like the flute player was. You know, our world is completely changed, going from the life we knew it into the belly of a snake. Imagine being in the belly of a huge snake. It's dark, very tight. Every place you turn, there's the belly of the snake. The entire environment in this wet, warm, restrictive belly is pulling at you to conform to its wishes. This can be similar to the way a person may feel who is experiencing a deep grief. Sometimes the grief takes over and you feel that your whole life has to conform to the grief rather than to your own wishes. Notice in the story that the flute player took his bag of maize and knife with him. He realized that this was not a short-term project. He knew he must cut away a little bit of the belly at a time, and he seemed to have faith that eventually he'd get to the heart of the matter. This is the way it is with grief, guys. We need to come prepared and be ready for the long haul. The flute player was ready for his journey. He took along what he needed for his prolonged struggle. He didn't kill the snake with one blow. He knew that he had to carve away a little bit at a time. I guess we need to realize that every time we experience the emotions involved in our grief, we're taking another chunk out of the snake's belly and getting a little closer to the heart of the matter. In our story, one of the reasons the flute player responded to the call of the village women was that children were being killed. This is also true of grief. When we are carrying unresolved grief within us and dragging the snake behind us, we lose our childlike qualities, such as spontaneity and creativity. Our child within us is being strangled. Our reason for wanting to kill the snake should include the renewal of our passion and creativity, which will emerge after we leave the snake. When in the belly, we must learn a different way of living. In this dark, restrictive environment, the pit, our usual skills for living are not particularly effective. The situation calls on us to use parts of ourselves that are not our usual strengths. Instead of seeing clearly what is before us, we might have to grope around, using our sense of touch rather than our eyes. Once our activity has brought us into the belly, we may need to find or develop other skills that will help us in navigating this inner terrain. The flute player in our story found a way to enter his grief through his flute playing. Notice the flute player did not continue playing once he was in the belly of the snake. He had to use other skills in order to deal with the snake. And also notice that his work was not done from outside, but was accomplished from inside the snake. This is the way it is with grief. We must do the work from the inside, but find our way into it through our strengths. Guys, this story is meant to be a map and a guide through the experience of loss, helping you move through the pain of loss and into a place of healing and transformation. As I said, I found this analogy of being swallowed by a snake very useful in my understanding of grief management, and I trust you got some meaning out of it as well. God bless.